What is going on, guys? Hey, I wanted to come back to you, and I wanted to bring you an interview between David Pakman and Vivek Ramaswamy. And I'm sure you guys know who David Pakman is. He's definitely a far left podcaster. And again, I disagree with the majority of what he has to say. But this interview, it was pretty good. It was on wokeness. And even though I disagree with David Pakman, the more I see people like Vivek, the more I see of Vivek, the more I like him. You know, the more that I'm on board with a lot of what he has to say. So, and they're talking about wokeness and, man, what it's doing to our culture and what it's doing to our kids. And which I think is really important, a really important subject. You know, again, what is this whole ideology doing to our kids? And again, you see the kind of the insanity of the left with this. You definitely do, man. You see what they're trying to push. And we have got to understand that is pure mental illness. Again, if you believe that you can somehow make a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy, yeah, you're mentally ill. You are. But hey, guys, if you would, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Thanks.
The reason I'm in this race is that, A, I believe I can take that agenda even further than he did and unite the country in the process. Because for whatever reason, and I don't blame him for this, but I think it's just a fact.
Okay.
That about 30% of this country becomes, you know, I would say mentally ill in a certain form, psychiatrically ill.
I've heard you say that.
Yeah. They agree with things that they otherwise wouldn't have agreed with. They start disagreeing with things they otherwise would have agreed with just because he's saying them. And I think that for whatever reason, I'm not yet having that effect on people, and I don't think I will.
No,
and that
you
allows
don't
us
seem to make people crazy. You know, the interesting thing about the psychiatric thing, you know, your background is in, if I understand, undergrad biology and then business. Mine is in economics and communication. Neither one of us are doctors. But one of the interesting things is I was in Chicago last weekend. I was sitting very close proximity to a table of MAGA folks who were talking about the primary, and I was just listening in like a fly on the wall. It was an incredible sociological experience as a progressive. I was out of my bubble. And they start talking about, you know who's really in charge? It's Obama through the military. And then someone else says, you know, the vaccines, this and that and the other thing. And someone else says, you know, we got to get rid of the deep state. And one guy goes, you know who I like? I like that Indian guy. They didn't know your name. They didn't know your name, but they refer to you as that Indian guy because he's not part of the deep state, et cetera, et cetera. The definition of what we mean by psychiatric illness, a lot of the stuff I'm hearing from folks about JFK Jr.'s alive and all this different conspiracy stuff that surrounds MAGA, it seems as though when we start just saying psychiatric illness, I don't know if it gets us to where the country is and what would be best for it necessarily, which is why I wonder about this talking point you've come up with about Trump makes a third of the country psychiatrically ill. What are you getting at when you say that?
Joe Biden's definitely not in charge. We understand that. You know, again, man, it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left or whatever. You know that Joe Biden's not in charge. Man, he has a hard time, I'm sure, at this point, tying his damn shoe. So again, we know he's not running this country. We know that. So who is? Yeah. I mean, the Democratic establishment, I'm sure, and they're using him, and that's the way it has been. But again, we have got to understand that when you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. You know, because if you're wanting to say that the people on the right are mentally ill because they think that Barack Obama is still in charge, you know, you're wanting to point to that as mental illness, but you believe that you can make a boy a girl and a girl a boy. And again, you can't make a boy a girl or a girl a boy. You can't chop off parts or add things on or, you know, whatever. You have hormone blockers and surgeries and whatever. That again, that's not real. That is mental illness. If you believe that you're actually changing that person's, sex, yeah. Again, we have gotten to a point to where we have to understand we have been lied to over and over again. So, you're going to have people on the right that are going to question things. I mean, look at what's happened just in the past couple of years with the COVID situation. Again, they've gone back and forth on things. Things that you couldn't say 2 years ago on social media or you'd be kicked off. You can say now. It's true. We know it's true. And the thing is, man, we have gone way off the rails on stuff. We have, but to say that you're mentally ill because you don't believe Joe Biden's in charge, but folks that believe you should be able to chop the penises off of, kids. Again, you're talking about mental illness. I mean, come on. If you live in glass houses, you shouldn't throw stones.
We are all starved, not even hungry anymore. We are starved for purpose and meaning and identity at a time in our national history when the things that used to ground us in our identity, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have largely disappeared. That leaves a moral vacuum, a black hole in its wake. And when you have a black hole that runs that deep, poison fills the void. And so what we need to do is to fill that void with a vision of, in my opinion, American national identity without apology, to dilute that poison to irrelevance. That is what we are starved for. As it relates to the conspiracy theorizing on the right,
sure,
that as you'll label, okay? So first of all, I think it's worth just doing a recounting of the last 24 months in this country, right? We were told that a virus that did not originate in a lab in Wuhan, if you said it did, that you were racist and had your social media accounts locked.
Okay, if we
now know
Vivek,
that it originated,
only
right?
because we have limited time and we've gotten this list so many times.
Yep.
I know where you're going with this, which is sometimes people have been wrong about certain things.
Not sometimes, many times would be my only point, because I could go
totally
for a long
fine.
time. In the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so we got to be on a point where I think that alone is prima facie evidence, okay, that it's not enough to just point to the ridiculous facial claim that somebody makes and sort of narrowly solve for, can you denounce that as false? You're playing the wrong game, especially against the backdrop that is not reading a room correctly.
Yeah.
Where time and again, and it is, and so you'll cut me off appropriately because you know the list as well as I do. But time and again, it has to be measured against the backdrop of every major instance that has been systematically suppressed has come out to have had some element of truth to it.
Again, he's right. Just in the past couple of years, I mean, look how many times we've been lied to. Just in the past couple of years. And not only that, but look at all the stuff that's going on right now with the ET phenomenon or whatever. And then again, they're testifying in front of Congress that, aliens are crashing, spaceships here on Earth and they're recovering bodies. I mean, again, we have got to look at how much we've been lied to. And, again, they were supposed to release all the information about JFK, and they haven't. They haven't released that. I mean, Trump never did. He was supposed to. Biden, he didn't. He said he was going to. So again, we have got to understand that we know we're being lied to. So again, we question things. And I have much more respect for people that are willing to question things instead for accepting whatever they're being told on the news.
The media seems to be the one that uses a label of anti-woke to describe my campaign. I am running a campaign to revive national identity. And at the time I wrote Woke Inc., you know what people criticized the title back then? People said, nobody knows what this word is.
Okay.
So at the time I wrote the book, that was actually the chief criticism of the title. And unlike many on both the left and right, I will define exactly what it is that I view as a symptom of a deeper malaise in our current.
I thought you were going to define woke itself.
No, well, wokeness is a symptom, and I will define the symptom, but it is also a deeper cancer. And wokeness is a worldview that says that there are certain invisible social relationships between us, grounded on oppression or oppressor relationships and statuses of people based on race, gender, and sexuality. That you're either oppressor or oppressed based on those genetic attributes, that there are invisible societal injustices resulting from them, and that we have to be awake, alert to those injustices and then correct for them. Left or right, I think that that's a neutral definition that describes at least what we're talking about.
I have a different one, which is much simpler, which is simply becoming woke is becoming aware that there are problems in our society bigger than any one person's circumstances. That's how I define it. And I know it's very different from what you're saying.
That's a slightly different definition, and one that is set up for more people to agree with it. But I think that that's not, I respectfully, David, that's a definition that on its own does not support the specificity of policies that follow from it. Right? Racial quota systems in boardrooms. The fact that a company cannot list on NASDAQ unless it has a certain number of quotas filled by racial minorities or sexual minorities on its board. That is a much more specific instantiation that closely tracks my definition of wokeness than a general definition that there are just vaguely some things wrong in the world that are systems that don't result from individual behavior. Well, okay, that's a big leap to get from there to racial quota systems, especially when actually in that very rule, and I'm just triple clicking on that just to get specific, but it is not an outlier. It is an example of what we see pervasively, where people then came back and said, well, how about veteran status or disability status? To which the government, the SEC, and the NASDAQ said no, because that would reduce the desired forms of diversity on that board. So we are talking about very specific instantiations.
Guys, man, David's definition sounded good, but again, we understand that's not actually based in reality. It's not. Because again, right now, to list a company on the NASDAQ, you had to have so many black people, so many women, so many, and again, so many people of color. And that's not the way it should be. It should be based upon merit, based upon qualifications. And again, man, that severely limits what you can do with a company. Because again, you're being told that you can't hire the best people. You can't hire the most qualified people. You have to hire, again, the most qualified people in the group that we tell you to. So again, that's not equal. That's equity. And again, equity and equality are not the same thing. Again, they're not close. You can't have equity and equality. The two don't go together. If you have equity, things are not equal. Again, you're picking people because you have a quota. You have to have so many people, so many black people, so many women, so many brown people. And again, so many people of a certain demographic. You have to have in place. So again, it's not about choosing the right people. So again, we have got to get away from that. We have got to understand if we're going to do things right, if we're going to do things equal, then we've got to get away from equity. We've got to get away from this wokeness. We have to.
When it comes to the questions asked in these polls about wokeness, when it comes to trans, controlling books, drag shows, etc., I'm not hearing that that's actually the fight you really want to have, which if that's the case, I like that. I think that that's good.
Yeah, well, here's the one fight on that narrow issue that I do care to have is as it relates to kids.
Okay.
So I believe that, and what I'm about to say is controversial to some, but I'm going to share my view, and I think it's grounded in history and fact and my true perspective. I think that gender dysphoria, especially in kids, is a mental health condition that and should be treated as such. And for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-4, and I believe the DSM-5 has been viewed that way. When a kid says that their gender does not match their biological sex, that is usually evidence that something else is wrong in their life, and we should get to the bottom of that. I do not believe it is compassionate to affirm that kid's confusion. I believe that is cruelty. I believe 20 years from now, we will look back at allowing kids to undergo genital mutilation and chemical castration in the way that we would also judge Iran for doing the same thing. In Iran, if you're gay, You know what they do? They make you undergo
Yeah.
genital mutilation and sex change. I think many gay kids are going through the same thing today because of the trans fixation in really American culture right now. I met two young women, Chloe and Katie, both of whom badly regret decisions they made to undergo double mastectomies, and in one case, a hysterectomy, as well as chemical castration. They will never, chemical intervention, they will never be the same again either. I think that is barbaric, and for the same reasons that we do not allow kids to get a tattoo before the age of 18, we should not allow kids to undergo genital mutilation or chemical castration.
Now, of
below
course,
the
you
age
can
of
get a
18.
tattoo before the age of 18 with parents' permission, and that's what many want to see.
Actually, in many
here.
states you can't. And
I'm not aware of any such states, but I take your word that there are some where that's the case. I mean, listen, on that issue, and we're out of time, and I'm going to let you go because I know that that you have a lot of things to get to. On that issue, I do want to say that in every state I'm aware of, the issue of gender dysphoria in kids does start as a behavioral health intervention. I think the question becomes, and I don't pretend to have an answer to this question at this time. How far is it okay to go beyond that? I am with you that I don't yet believe we have the full 2020
and then,
hindsight
David,
on.
The one thing I will leave with you on this too, and you seem like I appreciate your reasoned approach here to having a conversation, something I don't always get, is if gender dysphoria is such a condition of suffering, and I believe it is, in the rare instances in which it occurs, why on earth are we now going out of our way to create more of it? By purposefully weaving in the possibilities for gender confusion at ages where literally, and there's good evidence to back this up, when there's one case of gender dysphoria in a school, it spreads. Like you could do the R squared math on this, right? It's like you could compare that to COVID, the spread of COVID, and you can epidemiologically model this stuff. Yes, this is actually having an effect that we're going out of our way to create a condition that we say creates more suffering. I'll give you one example in New Hampshire, where I travel frequently. The state just shot down a piece of legislation. All it said was, if a kid in school identifies as a gender different than their biological sex, the parent has a right to know. And over a lot of activism and opposition, they shot that bill down.
You know, number one, we got to be honest, man. There's a big difference between getting a tattoo and, gender affirming care. A big difference. We have got to understand that when you do these gender affirming, care procedures, again, these are irreversible things that you're doing to kids. Again, you can't stop puberty at age 12 and then, start back up at age 17. You can't do that. It's not going to work. Again, and I mean, even if it did, even if you could just unpause it, again, that's 5 years later. The experiences that you were supposed to have and that were supposed to happen to your body when you were 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, it's now happening when you're 17, 18, 19, 20. So again, we have got to understand that you can't do that. It's stupid. And again, you could never make a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy. You can't do it. Now you can resemble it, but you can never truly do that. And again, you weren't born in the wrong body. Nobody was. You were born in the body that you were born in. And again, man, if you're like intersex or something, again, that's a different situation. That's a different situation. But even then, they shouldn't do any kind of surgeries or anything unless it's medically necessary. Unless if somebody can't pee right, because again, they're having a problem down there because they were born intersex. That's something else. Again, you're making so they can use bathroom or whatever properly. But again, we don't need to have these gender affirming care procedures. We don't need to put kids on hormone blockers or therapy or whatever. We don't need to do that. We don't need to have surgeries for kids. Get things chopped off. And again, if you believe that they should, there's something wrong with you. And again, I totally agree with Vivek. We need to protect our kids from this kind of stuff. This woke mind virus. We need to protect our kids from that. Again, we've got to be willing to stand up. We've got to be willing to say, no, this stuff is wrong, man. It's wrong. Again, you're playing God. You're playing with things you shouldn't play with. And again, what is going to happen to these kids 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road? You know, again, man, even 2, 3 years down the road. Yeah. I think there's going to be huge backlash on this kind of stuff. I really do. But anyways, guys, if you would, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Thanks.
You son of a